Alright guys, so I'm going to show you how to parent all your stuff together so you can get a nice clean rig. I'll go over real briefly some of the sets you have to watch out for and some of the things that I added in here that you may not see just yet. I will go over this also in class so you can follow along. You'll notice I have a main controller and a secondary controller. Now this changes between games and animation. Sometimes games there will only be a main controller, but when you're animating you'll have a secondary controller you'll animate with, and this guy is your global or main controller. He controls the whole rig to place him in the world and to also help scale him down and so forth. So you can see, let's go over this guy. You can see you got a few other things I've added in here. These things are clavicle controls that I made so that the character can shrug. And to do so, what I did is made this guy, made a clavicle left, and with this I'm going to shift select on that clavicle itself, and I'm going to run a constraint on this. So I'm going to do a parent constraint because I want it to be in charge. And again, when you do parent constraint, make sure you set to maintain offset. By default that's on, but if you're working at school, it's always, and you're sharing a computer, make sure you do check that, because that allows Maya to calculate both in 3D space. Hit add. Do the same thing here. I'll hit the G key to repeat the last process. You can test them out to make sure they're working. Little shoulder shrug, looking pretty good. We got our pole vectors active. You can test them out. There you go. And the nice thing about freezing transforms, you can set it to 0, and the animator can set that to 0 if he needs to. As you get more advanced, you can replace that with a group system, which we're going to go a little bit over here. I do have a video on doing the group method, but I'm just going to point out a couple things here, because the group method can be done with set-driven key. Now again, set-driven key isn't my first one to use. I literally like to go in here and grab what's going on. But the one thing you have to be careful when you have a lot of IK systems and you have a lot of group systems, and you decide to use this whole system where you're actually grabbing the controllers who are in charge of groups, you could get a cycle error if you're not careful, if you didn't do it correctly, and you could get a just a confliction of information. So you just got to be careful of that. Test it out as you go. In my case, I have a toe tap, and I put a controller in charge of this toe tap, but he's also underneath my controller. Sometimes that can be a bit of a problem. And what I like to do, sometimes I don't even put this. I put this in here so you guys can visually see it. A lot of times, as an animator, I'll just go in there and just grab that IK. Why? I don't know. Just works for me. Instead of putting another system in here that may cause a cycle error with double information. There is an easy fix to that. Believe it or not, you can use another group to fix it. And so I just wanted to point that out real quick. But on the footnote, let's talk about this for a second. So this one is the inverse foot. All I did instead of the set-driven key was make a system of controls which allow me to imitate and do the foot roll here. All I did was parent constraint those bones underneath these controllers. And as I demonstrated in class, these IKs are underneath those corresponding bones. You have to make sure they're named correctly. So this IK is called our inverse ankle. And then I put that inverse ankle underneath my inverse bone. Go and zoom in on him. There he is, my inverse ankle bone. So I put him underneath there. I made it so that he was in charge of him. When he was in charge of him, then I parent constraint it to that controller called inverse ankle also. So you can see it all kind of comes into order. This one here is also underneath, in charge of the inverse ball. We can grab this guy. Look at that, right ball, inverse. So it's all controlled here. So what I'm doing again, I'm literally making it so I can go in here and grab the controls. And as an animator, for me, that just seems a lot more intuitive instead of going into the attribute editor all the time. We can go in here, and I even have a main controller to do like a smashing of something, maybe a bug or something. And then I made another controller right here. Kind of breaking the law here. I'm actually have a controller which is a subsystem and moving it away from the bone chain. The only problem, this is what I meant. Let me see if I can duplicate the error. The only problem, what happens sometimes when you go to rotate, you can lose. Looks like it's working good, but you can lose that information. Now, remember I pointed out to you guys when you're doing this in 2012 that the IK kind of tears away. Their default's a little bit different now, and I think it's because of the human IK system, which they've made. And I'll go over that later on in class today. It's pretty awesome, but if it's not really, for me as an animator, I find it a little bit weird, a little bit slightly counter, because I have to work again in the attribute editor to navigate, and then I work into the controller. So we'll talk about that difference. You can get familiar with it. So I think that's why that this IK tears away. So what you can do to fix it, you can actually go to this attributes in here on this IK, and it is SC Solver, but because it is just a single foot in there. But you can put it on sticky. Now, putting that foot tip on sticky, you can prevent your IK from ripping away when you do the inverse foot and when you do the group foot method. It's kind of annoying to me. It's a default thing. I did a little digging and I found out that's the only solution. I was kind of trying to avoid that. I was hoping I missed something, but I don't like having sticky on. The only reason sticky really is around is that you can lock down things. And when you start animating, I like having it off. So what we'll do when I made the group method, which is on the left, excuse me, his left, and when I made the inverse foot, I again just put the sticky on the toe so we could simulate that whole foot roll. All right. Now the group foot method, we will go in class. I also have a video on this, the simple version. I will give you a more complicated version in not this week's homework, but next week's as we get close to the midterm. What I did was instead of these inverse foots, I built inverse foots. Instead of this invert foot system, I built a group method, a group system, which this group system replaces the bones. And what I made was one group system up here at the ankle, like I made a ball group system, and it's in my video. And I moved his pivot up here, and then I made an ankle group system, and I moved his pivot down here. And what I did was have them in charge of the corresponding IKs. So it can be a little bit confusing at first when you learn it. Now we'll go over it in class, but it allows me to get this system, same thing as before, but cleaner. I don't have another bone thing to deal with. So in my video, I show you how to do it, a basic way to do it with Setra McKee. I start that, but in here, this is what I like. I like to have it so it's completely controller driven. So you can see I have the foot roll working just like next door. And I also even have a foot tap, which I've locked down the attributes. You can see here. Oh, let's close the tool, sorry. Clicked inappropriately. And I locked it down. And what you want to do when you are setting up your final parts of your rig, and let's call this toe tap to keep it clean. You want to hide things from your animator because he's going to break stuff. He's going to get a hold of stuff and break it. So what I did was simply go in here and I just right clicked and I said lock and hide selected. So I locked everything else except for the translate because I just want this to be able to be the toe tap. Ding, 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 ding. See that? Pretty cool. So those are a quick review of what I did for these FK feet. I even made a controller in here in the inverse foot one. You probably could do without, but I just made it. It was just a little bit easier for my brain at the moment. Either way works just fine. Alright, so that's a quick rundown of that foot. I just want to demonstrate that and show that to you before I started parenting, and you wondered, what the heck are these? So I wanted to explain it real quick. Alright, so we got our guy ready to go. And I also built a neck system, which I can review that with you in class. Basically, it's just the same thing as a spine, but parent constraint, so that when I move the neck and I rotate, it moves together, and I can individually grab things, move them together, and so forth. Pretty cool. Now, if you don't want your animator, again, to scale or to translate, you can select them. Go like this. This is what I was just showing you. Right click and say lock and hide selected. And that prevents your animator from breaking that. Now, trust me, there are animators that think they're riggers, and they will go in the channel box, and this is anytime that, or not channel box, excuse me, anytime channel control, they will go in here, they'll try to find their way and try to, oh, gotta make sure I have something selected, try to unlock what you've done. And you don't want to give them that opportunity to do that. So just be aware of that. They will do that. They think they know how to rig, and it's going to make you mad. And trust me, you've had some projects where that's happened. The only way you can get them not to do that is you make a script or something before this channel box comes up. You have to do it in Python, telling them not to unlock anything. But if you have to, maybe your art director says, hey, we do need that keyable. I lied. I was completely drunk at the company party. You can go under keyable, and you can lock things manually here like we did over here, and you can also say he wants that certain thing unlocked. You can go in here and grab it and bring it back from the dead. So you can grab whatever it is that is locked and hide. So we can actually go in here and maybe grab this guy. We'll go to this original one. It went directly to the parent. Didn't do it for the other one, so we'll go to this guy. Do it again. And we'll get it locked, and you'll see these guys are here, and maybe says, hey man, I want to translate these. So you just simply grab them, and you just move them over. Now they're unlocked, but they're still hidden. So you go in here under keyable, and you see that we have this guy here. We have rotate. All these guys are keyable. Non-keyable. There's a translate. And we can grab these guys and now bring them back into the system. Move. There they are. Okay? So I just want to show that to you real quick. It's pretty easy stuff, but it allows you to lock and hide. And keeping things clean, again, your animator will try to find this stuff, and sometimes they may think they know how to rig, and they don't, and they will break stuff. One time we had a rig set up where the eyes were locked down. My rigger did it 3 or 4 times, and the animator still went in there, didn't select the controller. I have no idea what he was drinking. I kept getting the eyes. I have no idea what was happening there. So it's maybe just an old bad habit he carried over, which messed everything up in our pipeline. We ended up fixing it, though. All right, so we got our spine. We got our controllers for our IKs here. And we have our pole vectors, and we even have our clavicle. So what we need to do, we need to lock everything underneath this main except the IK controls. And the reason why you want to do that, everything but the IK controls, is because you want your IKs to be set based on their positioning, not based on this local controller's positioning. You want your IKs to be read from these controllers. Really, really, really important that you understand that concept. Because it's easier to animate. Now you can do it without it, but it's easier to animate that way. You can have this guy just controlling the root and other items, and the IK will only be controlled by the main one, which is where you place it in the world. Again, this one places it in the world, this one controls its main movement, and the IKs will go along only with this guy and are just passive to this guy, because it just makes more sense, and you'll understand when you get more into animating why that is. Because it pretty much is just you in control, and you don't. It's basically you're not letting Maya think ahead for you. You will animate those IK controllers when you are ready, and it's actually a little bit better way to do it. Some people might have different views on that, but I think it's pretty solid, and most rigs do work like that. All right, so now this is our spine control here. We got our main control here, right there, pretty cool. And what we can do, this is actually not main control. This is our hips. This is our spine. Let's make one more, and we're going to call him our root. So I'll do Control D, duplicate him. I love having parent constraint because no information is carried over. I'll make this a real big here. And we can use this guy if you want, if you're comfortable with it. We can use this as our root. Now, that's up to you. I personally like using our main guy as our root control. Just for me, makes a little more sense. So you can have a single out one. Just be careful of your hierarchy order. Or we can have one down here. So what we'll do, let's grab this controller. We're going to parent it underneath him. What we can do is do everything all at once. Now, when you do everything all at once, it's kind of a little bit easier because you can keep track of things. Order of operations is really big. So if you do things one at a time, there's a chance you may miss something. So what I'll do, and I'll start over again, I'm going to grab the controller. I'm going to grab my clavicles. Notice my neck controls are underneath the top spine line. Grab my clavicles. And then I'm going to grab my hips. Double check everything. I think we're okay. And then grab my root. And then finally, I'm going to grab the local controller. And I'm going to hit P. So what that did is put all these controls in here underneath my character. Notice I left out again the pole vectors and the IKs. Because remember, pole vectors are related to IKs. I left them all out. Because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the main controller. And the main controller, I'm going to put this guy and everything else, the IKs and the pole vectors, underneath him, the main controller. So the main controller is going to be now my main focus. He's the guy I'm going to be focusing on. So what I'll do, let's try it again. Let's grab this guy here. And then now, I'm going to grab my foot control. Oh, let's actually do the foot control real quick. Actually, I left this open so you can actually see what's going on. So I showed you that I had my FK system set up here with my IK, so I got literal movement controls. And when I say FK, I mean I literally can rotate things. And I have it here set over here too, so there's no set trim key in here. We got to be able to move this guy. So I have 2 foot controls here. We need to put all these feet underneath these controllers. So what's the main one here? This guy's the main one, right? So we're going to shift select the controller. So I made a main controller here. Shift select this guy, and this one's the group foot method. That's why he looks broken. So if you're 4 o'clock in the morning watching this, clear that up. Hit P, and then now we have a foot control. And you can test it out. So we can go in here and test it out. Has complete use of his legs. He can walk. So we go to the other one. The main control I have set up right. Oh, gotta grab the other one. There you go. Right there. And we also, though, you'll notice, even though that is in charge of pivot, we also have this guy. This is our inverse foot. He's actually kind of important. So what I can do is grab this main control, shift select underneath my inverse foot, and hit P. So hopefully we don't get any cycle errors. And if that happens, let me know. You can actually create a group to fix that. Groups are great. They're like freeze transform. So I got this guy underneath that one main inverse foot root. And then I'm going to shift select this controller. I'm going to hit P again. So now we have this guy moving. Bending the knee, great. Awesome sauce. Control Z. Got a pole vector, it's active. He's a little bit constrained right now. Actually, I probably didn't set him. That's okay. The other one works just fine. So we got this guy all set up. Okay, so now what we need to do is just make sure everything's going under the same hierarchy. Now if we see the hips, grab that area right there. When we grab here, we grab the spine. And again, you can give these each names. I'm just going to go through this real quick here so you can watch the order of operations. So we got the base of the spine controller. We have the neck underneath there. We have the hips. And if we go to our first controller here, we'll notice we have all those underneath that. What we do not have, also want to make sure, what we do not have is everything. We don't have the IKs or the pole vectors underneath the world controller right there. Let me check one more thing we need to do here. These guys, I want to make sure your clavicles are underneath the top of the spine controller. Make sure I parent that. There we go. Got that all set up. So I'm going to grab this guy, and then I'm going to shift select the IK controls. I'm going to grab the pole vectors. I'm going to grab my IK handle tools and my pole vectors. IK handle controllers. We got the root, and then lastly we'll grab this guy and we'll hit P. Now what we should have is a fully moving rig. Look at that. Pretty nice. And then we can also, should be able to scale it with no problems. Look at that. Nice. The ultimate test of your rig is to go in here and do a rotation. Now if you see any weird flipping, there's a problem. There's a translation issue. It looks like this guy's golden. Good to go. That's about it.